If you house them in simple...
The look of something that has been engaged in a certain kind of behavior over a period of time.
Yeah, it wants to do more than that. Then it wants to introduce interference. See, it wants to set up a system of models of a thought process. And these are chains which have definite wires that go from one to the other. There's a generator that creates a spark. Below that is a crystal bath that is growing certain crystals that suggest transmission, and then this goes into a sort of transformer that is, and these are all mental stations. And then on the way to the receiving tower, this extruded force is interfered with by swinging brain patterns. In other words, it's almost as if, as this thing journeys in physical shape, you know, these things are physical. You can look at them as it sort of journeys in this sort of what I've been using as a material a lot is wire mesh, because it has this sort of diaphragmous kind of quality of looking as if it's if it can be extruded, pushed from the inside. And as these things hang and are interfered with by these progressively more erratic pendulum brain passages, it becomes more and more shaped as a configuration of, in this case, of overload, of erratic interference. Then it engages the tower, the receiving tower, and then it's interfered with once more. It's extruded from the top by another sort of considered almost shaped thought. Well, finally, the thing that's interesting about this, and I think that you may have pointed this out in this thing that you wrote a few months ago, is that it is outside on the ground. Here is a mind that literally is being blown through by the wind. And so if you start to set up a swinging abstract models of a thought process, and then you can bring in a real image, like a real tree. It's almost as if the tree crashes through your head as you're thinking of this. In other words, this isn't sort of a cerebral like masturbation. This is, in fact, a way of elevating an imagistic art at a real high velocity mental station.
Well, and I don't think anybody's going to understand a word of what we're saying, but it's really interesting. Go ahead. I want to hear the rest of this.
Well, it's not that difficult to understand.
I know, because the image is so simple.
Well, here I'll try to make it simpler. Essentially, all one is trying to do is find models for the way they think, and these models. The reason why this should happen is because during the 70s there was a tremendous amount of interrogation and really valid spade work. In other words, there were works done simply for their methods of learning. It was a very sort of unusual period in that sense. Works of art were given away simply to learn something else by the artists, and these works failed. These works were terrible.
What was it that needed to be learned, though? Was it how to think about a new way of making art that needed to be learned?
Well, I think what had to be learned is a new way or a more profound way of practicing structure in real time. I think that you know, if you look at sculpture, it's a lot of it. I mean, it's pretty embarrassing, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it.
You just had your work in a show that included a lot of the so-called masters of modern sculpture.
Yeah, but
what do those things look like?
I mean, I fail a lot too. I think that's part of the process. But sculpture as
you're talking about an ambition that is somehow flawed more than
it's been very conservative. Well, let's think about Jackson Pollock. Let's think about his mind for a minute, and let's think about his paintings. And let's suppose that maybe here in 1980, one can without a great deal of idealism, suspect that they could literally transact their physical mode in his temporal region prior to the painting. In other words, let's say that Jackson Pollock was more interesting before he delivered that substance onto the canvas.
But he wasn't painting until then. I mean, so whatever was happening in his mind, it wasn't art yet.
Well, yeah, but see, it's yes, it is. I mean,
I know you would say that it is, but but if he hasn't made something, then what are we talking about? We're
talking about the fact that what he made was cooled down. No, I fundamentally believe this.
All right.
That an object is entropic. That the thing that finally rolls off the assembly line and plops itself down is not as good as a process that makes it.
I mean, how long do you think people have believed that?
I think it's obvious. I mean, I think that in examining the cave paintings and things of that sort, you would come to the conclusion that the pure radiance of these things were always in a prior step. They
isn't it possible that that whether something that's made has this life of or inherent or immanent energy is partly a matter of who's looking?
Well, I don't know.
I mean,
that always drops the conversation down a little bit.
It does. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. But
you can get hung up on the fact that
I mean, I don't think
an object is not a person, right? There's no way you can make an object into a person. There's no way that you can make an object into something that is alive. And if it's basically the fact that is just one of the facts of life, then
see,
do you know what's
there's literally
I mean, I know this is kind of it's almost as though you've got a dualism that is going to insist somehow that if anything isn't mind, it's dead.
Yeah, but everything is a mind. You see, that's I think.
Why can't a painting be?
It's a trite version. You see, there's better examples. I think Con Ed is a better example, quite frankly. And what's so good about the mind? Well,
because that's what we are.
Yeah, I think basically it's pretty hard to beat. I think that the way people sort of succumb to these desires in their pursuits, especially in art, should be simply to allow the most profound objectives to enter their system naturally. In other words, you wouldn't want to kind of die and finally realize that you've practiced prejudice about a certain thing, and you had this sort of neurotic kind of interference that made you sort of compromise. Basically, you want to sort of believe that you are at least able to be infiltrated by certain kinds of power, and these powers have been analytically decided upon by just desire alone. You just want to be hit by the best stuff. And then with that stuff, you want to sort of begin your recipe. You want to start making your stew. And who wants to make stew out of redundancy? Who wants to spend their life? That's a waste of time. Who wants to perform anything not thinking that they are a recipient of real classified input?
Yeah.
Real sort of
if
carefully
you look at, Giotto or somebody, he was probably thinking that that's exactly what he was doing.
Well, I know there's all kinds of ways to sort of justify this.
It's not true. I just think that, for example, if you are a religious person, you really have an edge on this game, because you know you're getting special information, right?
Well, yeah, but you see, I don't think anyone who would be considering things of this sort, like diagnostic machines and detection apparatus, the extensions of the thought process would necessarily be religious.
No, I don't think he would be at all. I think the mind is about as good as you can get if God isn't around. Really?
Yeah.
I mean, what else is there that's so infinitely perplexing and
Well, let's carry this a little bit further. I mean, let's take it one step more and say that, okay, sculpture during the 80s, it's not going to be, but let's pretend that it's sculptors are going to now start to distrust mechanisms that have made art for them in the past, and they're going to start to consider art as something a little bit more dynamic or structure. This is art, but it's couched in sort of sculpture, or structures, installations, sort of phenomena. And let's say that the objective will be to actually get to a point where you think physically. In other words, it's no longer thinking through things as much as fairly successful activation of exterior models that coexist or coincide with thought structures. You're literally thinking without your hands now. You're almost you've bypassed the sort of trust in this the fact that in your fingertips is a radiant quality that you can bestow upon this piece of sculpture as you crease it. You can sort of take this sort of historical continuum, pass it through your system, and imbue it, and then give it to the world. Well, if you don't believe you can do that, right? I don't think it can happen.
I don't believe in that either.
Well, I like to believe in it. I've liked to believe in it. I've looked at things and I've believed that they believe it, but it doesn't hold up in terms of any kind of scrutinizing of the process, because once you release it, you see, all you have to do is think, and in thinking, all you have to do is compare what that sort of process is in terms of energy versus these things you execute. And if they don't balance out, then you're inclined to believe that it's going. Just in the study of ballistics, a sort of undischarged rocket is pretty lethal. Sort of a stored power structure. Well, let's go into the mind and look at these. Let's try to concretize them. Let's try to pull them out into view. That's why, just in terms of simple, dumb sort of constituents of these new pieces are interesting. The fact that they all sort of look like they're aimed. Yeah. They have things like a lot of mobile elements. Things are hanging on. They're ready to be released. These are mental factories that are not going to believe that these things should be launched through them. They're going to hold them in check, keep them balanced, and by holding back that metaphor for the thought from flying through this system, they're going to start churning that system. They're going to deliver that morphology of the mind as a sort of waiting station.